Hello and welcome to Sideline Scoop Uncut Episode 1. I'm very excited to start this NFL podcast. I decided on it yesterday. As many of you guys know who watch my main channel, I break down the Packers. But for the past probably year or so, I've debated back and forth whether I wanted to start like an NFL podcast and do that. And I've decided today I'm going to make one. And we'll see if it continues. It probably will. I love to hear your guys' thoughts in the comments down below on what kind of things you guys would like to see. And there are lots of different things I want to touch on today around the NFL, with today being the first day we have a game. Bills versus Rams will be tonight. I'm filming this Thursday morning, so if you are watching this after Thursday, you already know the result of that game. I don't really want to focus too much on that game. There are a few other things I want to touch on more. We have Baker Mayfield's revenge game versus the Browns. We have the Packers' first game without Davante Adams. I want to discuss the Dallas Cowboys as well and why I think they're not going to be as good as they were last year. Lamar Jackson's contract, and then the Steelers. We're going to talk about Mitch Trubisky starting over Kenny Pickett. And I'll try to put the timestamps if I can figure that out. I've never done that before. I'll try to figure that out and put that in the description area down below, and we'll see if that gets figured out if you're coming for just one of those topics. If you want to stay for the whole thing, welcome. But I'm excited to get into this, and just the fact that the NFL season is finally back. It feels like it's been forever. It's been as a Packers fan, our season ended terribly against the San Francisco 49ers just, 6-7 months ago. Now we're finally back. I'm excited for the season, and I bet you are excited for this season as well. So the first thing I want to talk about here is Baker Mayfield playing against his former team in the Cleveland Browns, and there was lots of drama this entire offseason in Cleveland. Of course, with it starting when the Browns were pursuing Deshaun Watson, they, of course, signed him to a massive guaranteed deal, which affected the rest of the NFL when it comes to contracts because other QBs were saying, okay, can we get that full guarantee that Deshaun Watson got? And it hasn't really been the case, and that's sort of what's going on, I think, with Lamar Jackson's contract situation, which we will touch on later. But Baker Mayfield, rightly so, felt a little, displaced. He's like, what are you doing here? You gave me that fifth-year option. Now you're trying to bring in a different guy. He stays on the Browns for a while, gets traded to the Carolina Panthers. And I think when you look at the Panthers, I honestly like Baker Mayfield more than Sam Darnold. I think many people like this. And if you are a Panthers fan, I'll be curious to hear your thoughts on what you think is going to happen this season for the Panthers. But, the fact that game one we have the Panthers facing off against the Browns, it's just a great, some great scheduling by the NFL. It's not in Cleveland. It will be in Carolina with the Browns heading to Carolina. The game may be a little more exciting if Deshaun Watson was actually playing because he's more talented than Jacoby Brissett, who's going to be the Browns QB. But Deshaun Watson was, of course, suspended, the first 11 games of the season, so he won't be back until, week 12 or so. So the Browns, they may have a tough ride in the beginning of the season, and, we'll see what happens there with the Browns. But if you're Baker Mayfield, this game, you have to be so fired up. Not only has this team basically said, you're not good enough, we're going to replace you. Lots of people doubted Baker Mayfield, sort of just the way he played overall in this final 2021 season. But I honestly think Baker's going to be much better. When you look at the fact last year, dealing with that shoulder injury, and we saw years prior, he actually, took the Browns to the playoff, won a playoff game. And I think that Baker Mayfield is better than what he showed last year. Do I think he's a top 10 quarterback? Probably not, but I still feel like he's a middle-of-the-road quarterback who can get you wins. And I think when you look at this Carolina Panthers team, to have a player like running back Christian McCaffrey, who can do it all. There's a reason he's being, drafted as one of the top running backs in the NFL. When he's healthy, he is probably the best, dual threat running back in the NFL when it comes to running the ball and then also catching the ball out of the backfield. So I think Baker Mayfield is going to be, very grateful for Christian McCaffrey and what he's going to do this year. The only worry I have for the Panthers and Baker Mayfield is when you look at their offensive line. So I think the right side is mostly secure. The uncertainties are on the left side where they drafted Ep.1, number 6 overall. He was one of the best linemen in this draft, and so hopefully for the Panthers, he's able to develop into a great player. It is, though, his first game, and he's facing off against the Browns and Myles Garrett, so that could be a tough start for this offensive line, and we'll see if Baker Mayfield can, escape enough, and if this, Carolina Panthers team can keep him safe enough to allow him to hit these receivers here. And I do like the receiver core here in Carolina. With DJ Moore over here, I think he's a very, very solid player, and I think that this offense is honestly going to be much better than they were last year. As long as Christian McCaffrey stays healthy, if they can keep Baker Mayfield safe, I think that, the Panthers have a good shot this year, at least when it comes to week 1 against the Browns. I'm going to go with Panthers beating the Browns week 1. If Deshaun Watson was playing, it may be a different story, But it's going to be very exciting to see what Baker Mayfield does here. I feel like it's a must-watch game. I'm not sure what time it is. I'm hoping it's not at 3:25 when the Packers play, because I will be watching the entirety of every Packers game, so any other game does not matter to me in that moment. So I'm not sure what time they play, but I'll probably figure that out after this. So that should be a very exciting game. And there are lots of different matchups this week that are must-watch games. I mean, Bills-Rams tonight, of course. I think the Bills will take that one home. I think it'll be a good game, though. I have Stephon Diggs on my fantasy team. So I'm hoping he puts up some big numbers, but he may be facing off against Jalen Ramsey a lot, which is partially a problem for me and my fantasy team. Hopefully he gets the job done, though. I feel like he will. And I'm going to go with Josh Allen and the Bills tonight. And now I want to move on to another interesting scenario. I'll talk about the matchup that will be facing this team, but also just some information that's come out in the past week or so regarding Russell Wilson and the Seahawks. I actually think an article came out the past few days basically breaking down the entire situation when it comes to Seattle. We knew a little bit. It seems like Russell Wilson wasn't very happy with what was going on there in Seattle. But this article on ESPN by Brady Henderson really goes into depth. He has sources in the Seahawks, in the Russell Wilson's camp as well, and he gives an entire breakdown on basically what happened. And I want to read a couple paragraphs from this article, and then we'll discuss, Russell Wilson on the Broncos this year, playing against the Seattle Seahawks coming up on Monday Night Football, which should be a interesting game. Geno Smith is starting. I'm not sure, just the shot the Seahawks have in this game, because I think Russell Wilson and the Broncos are better. But nonetheless, let's get to this article here. It's very interesting. So first off, he discusses in the article that in 2017, the Seahawks GM attended Patrick Mahomes' pro day, and apparently if he was going to be available late in round one, which he obviously wasn't, the Seahawks, multiple sources said that the Seahawks would have taken Patrick Mahomes. And then next year, 2018, he goes to Josh Allen's pro day, and apparently this ruffled the feathers, for Russell Wilson and his camp, according to sort of their sources over there. So that makes sense. If you're, a GM of a team, you're coming in, you're going to other people's pro days, and you're discussing drafting one of those guys. I'm not shocked that Russell Wilson would be a little bit like, hey, like, I'm your quarterback, right? And they're like, okay, yeah, you're our quarterback for now, even though we were sort of looking around, sort of shopping around to see what else is around here. He didn't seem to like that, which I completely understand if you're Russell Wilson. Now to the first part of the article, or one excerpt I want to show you here. It says, Schneider had an explanation. He was working in the Green Bay Packers front office when Aaron Rodgers unexpectedly fell to them late in the first round in 2005. That experience, plus his and Carroll's offsided promise to leave no stone unturned in player evaluation, meant Schneider had to do his homework on quarterback prospects. He had to. Schneider's in-season schedule kept him from attending any of Mahomes' or Allen's games, so the pro day was his chance to see them throw live. Wilson's camp had a different view. They were bleeping pissed, a Seahawks front office source said. So, as I said, Russell Wilson, understandably, not liking that they're looking for other quarterbacks at that time. Then, of course, though, he signs that contract around that time and stays with the Seahawks for a while, gets a no-trade clause in there as well. And then about, 13 or so months ago, we got some information, coming after the, what year is it? We're in 2022 now, so that was after 2020. So the 2021 offseason, we got that out of nowhere, it seemed, at least from my perspective. Maybe if you're a Seahawks fan, you're sort of more in that situation. But Russell Wilson basically coming out and being like, you know what? If I wanted to be traded, which I don't necessarily want to be, but if I did, I'll be fine with the Raiders, Saints, Cowboys, and Bears. And so at that point, it was like, oh my goodness, is like Russell Wilson going to leave the Seattle Seahawks? Which if you would have said that, in the early, 2015, 16, you would have been like, no way, there's no shot that Russell Wilson leaves the Seahawks. And I feel like that's how you feel when any, great player on a team who's been there for years and years is there. It's just hard to imagine them leaving. Like when Brett Favre was with the Packers, it was hard to imagine him leaving. Tom Brady with the Patriots, Peyton Manning with the Colts. But lots of these guys do end up leaving. Russell Wilson did it as well. And I want to show you this here, another part from this article. So it says Wilson, according to a source close to him, didn't get a clear answer from the Seahawks on how they plan to improve their offensive line, prompting him to take his frustrations public after the Super Bowl. According to team and NFL sources, Wilson's comments angered Seattle's linemen. Left tackle Dwayne Brown would later express as much to reporters and team brass. Carroll and Schneider were caught off guard, believing all was well after they had worked together to hire Waldron. So Russell Wilson seemingly was not happy with the offensive line play there. He was sacked, incredible amount of times. And then apparently one of the offensive linemen was a little upset, which it makes sense. But if you're Russell Wilson, it's like, okay, guys, like, please help me stay protected because this greatly impacts how well I play. If I'm getting hit every single play, I'm not going to be a good quarterback. So please give me some help. And things seem to be a little shaky there with Russell Wilson and the Seahawks. And then, of course, the huge news came this offseason with the Broncos trading for Russell Wilson, trading away 2 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks, a 5th-round pick, Drew Lock, Shelby Harris, and Noah Fant. And so now here we come to Monday Night Football this week. Russell Wilson playing against the Seattle Seahawks. And I think if you're a Broncos fan, obviously you were very excited to get Russell Wilson in there. And after years after coming in and, getting Peyton Manning from the Colts, you struck some gold once again with Russell Wilson coming to resurrect your depleted quarterback situation there in Denver. And I think there's lots of hope in Denver as to what the Broncos can be this year. I think they can be a great team. The only issue for the Broncos is the fact that they're in the AFC West with teams like the Chiefs, the Raiders, and the Chargers. So even though they're going to be a good team, I honestly think the Chiefs will be better than them. I think the Chargers will be better than them. It's going to be close, and then the Raiders, who knows what's going to happen there. They're going to be a lot better with lots of the additions they made there. Stealing Davante Adams from my Green Bay Packers, which I was not happy about. I think we're going to be fine, but in the moment, it was a tough day for me. That day that Davante was stolen from me. But anyways, it's going to be very exciting to see exactly what Russell Wilson can do in Denver, and I'm going to be excited to watch lots of these Broncos games this year. I got Cortland Sutton on my fantasy team. Got him in like round 6 or something, and I've read he's supposedly going to be Russell Wilson's most likely top target. So it looks like I made a good move there. I mainly read it from other fantasy people who are deep into that kind of stuff. But anyways, Russell Wilson and the Broncos are going to be must-watch football lots of times this year. Excuse me, I got some coughing issues today. So now I want to discuss the Packers. Packers' first game without Davante Adams coming up on Sunday, playing against the Minnesota Vikings in Minnesota. I discussed this game a lot on my main channel where I just break down the Packers, but I figured I would touch on it a little bit here. And if you're not a fan of my other channel or you haven't subscribed to it or haven't seen it, I break the Packers down on that channel. But this one, I've messed around with this channel a lot, like doing different kinds of things. And I'm just, right now I'm contemplating a podcast, which I'm doing right now. And I don't have much of a plan for the future, but we'll see sort of how it adapts. Maybe I'll do it once a week. Who knows? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section if you would like. But anyways, I honestly don't think the Packers are going to be that much worse without Davante Adams. If you would have said Davante left and then we did nothing at the receiver position, I would have been worried because even though I love Allen Lazard and Randall Cobb, besides the other guys we added, that would have been a tough receiver room. But obviously the Packers came in, brought in Sammy Watkins, who was signed for a very cheap, good deal, I think, personally. He's not the guy he once used to be. He could potentially become that. We'll see. In this Packers offense, Rodgers has been praising him a ton, through training camp and sort of what he's seen from him. But I do think that this Packers receiver core is fine. We drafted Romeo Doubs, who's been balling out all of preseason. If you're a Packers fan, we covered him like almost every day because every single day he was making plays. And even though it was the preseason, I honestly think it is going to translate to the season. The Packers are planning to start Lazard if he's healthy. We'll see. Didn't practice yesterday. Sammy Watkins and Randall Cobb, but I feel like Dobbs is going to start getting lots of work in there. He'll obviously be used a little bit to start the season, and hopefully if he can continue sort of the success he had while he was playing in the preseason and training camp, I see no reason why he won't get more playing time. And of course, it depends on the play of Sammy Watkins as well as Allen Lazard as well. But coming into Minnesota, it's an interesting game. We saw yesterday that Zadarius Smith, former Packer, now in the Vikings, was very angry with how the Packers treated him. Matt LaFleur said he saw it differently. Who exactly knows what went down there, but he will be facing off against this Packers O-line. That there are some uncertainties when it comes to the injuries and all those kinds of things. But it's going to be a very good game. But I do think the Packers offense have enough. Their backfield is great, and they're going to have a top 5 defense, in my personal opinion. Packers fan opinion here. But I think it's a valid opinion. Top 5 defense, I think, is in the cards for the Packers. I do like the Vikings this year. I do think they've taken lots of strides forward, mainly due to the fact of Kevin O'Connell coming in here. The Vikings players seem to love him much more than they loved the prior coaching staff. And it really, when you bring the Rams offensive coordinator who just won the Super Bowl, he's bringing that Super Bowl energy to Minnesota, which I don't personally like. Please don't bring that energy anywhere near Minnesota. But it is what it is. Hopefully the Packers destroy them both times. We'll see what happens. That's what I'm betting on or hoping in or I hope happens, clearly, as a Packers fan. But it's going to be an exciting game, I think, to see what the Packers offense and what this Packers team looks like with Davante Adams now going to the Las Vegas Raiders. Okay, now I want to talk about the Dallas Cowboys. And, of course, they are facing off against the Buccaneers to start off the season once again. And I do live in the Dallas area. If you know my, what's the word? If you know my history, you know why I'm a Packers fan. My mom grew up in in Wisconsin, the state of Wisconsin, growing up. So she was raised a Packers fan. I was born in Dallas, but I was raised a Packers fan by my mom. So I sort of grew up not liking the Cowboys, even though I live like 5 minutes away from their like training facility in Frisco, Texas. Anyways, so I honestly don't think the Cowboys are going to be as good as last year. I think lots of people have a similar opinion. Probably not Cowboys fans. Tim, if you're watching this, one of my friends who's a Cowboys fan, you may not be watching this, who knows. But I don't think the Cowboys are going to be that great this year. I put my friend and I, Tim, put a Chipotle wager on the board, and we've done it the past couple of years. We predict the record on the Packers and Cowboys. Whoever gets closer on each, we have to buy each other Chipotle. But I think I'll be winning both this year. That's just my humble opinion. But when we look at this Cowboys team coming into 2022, there are a few worries. First off, you lose Amari Cooper, who I think is a big part of that Cowboys offense. You still do have CeeDee Lamb, who I think is a very talented wide receiver, and because of them losing not only Amari Cooper, but also losing Cedric Wilson, I think it's just going to lead to a massive year by CeeDee Lamb. And then if you look at the other players that the Cowboys lost on the offensive side of the ball, losing Lael Collins, and then, of course, losing Tyrone Smith to an injury, who will likely be out, their left tackle, who will likely be out until maybe the whole year, but most likely till at least December. They did decide to come in and recently in this past week bring in Jason Peters, who is a all-pro in the past left tackle, who I think it's a smart addition when you lose your great left tackle to bring in another great left tackle. It's a smart plan by the Cowboys. Added to the practice squad, they did draft offensive lineman Tyler Smith in the first round, and Jerry Jones did say on Tuesday that it's safe to say that Tyler Smith will be the fill-in starter for the Cowboys in Week 1 versus the Buccaneers at left tackle. So we'll see if that happens, if Peters is able to come in and start. I don't know. I haven't seen any updates up to that point. Maybe more will come out soon. But I just think overall, when you lose your left tackle, you lose your right tackle, this Cowboys offensive line, I think, is going to struggle a little bit this year, more so than they did last year. And I feel like in the past, the Cowboys always had a super, elite offensive line, and I think it's going to change a little this year. We'll see. Jason Peters at left tackle, he could play well. We'll see what happens there. Right tackle, a little bit of uncertainty there. But I just think when you look at the NFC East now, I honestly think the Eagles are going to be better than the Cowboys this year. I have Jalen Hurts in my fantasy team as well, so I'm hoping that happens for personal reasons, but also for actual reasons. The fact that the Philadelphia Eagles added A.J. Brown, you have Jalen Hurts coming into his third season in Philadelphia. I feel like from year 2 to year 3 with lots of quarterbacks, you see that huge jump forward. And I think when you just take in the fact his rushing ability and sort of the weapons he now has over there in Philadelphia, they were like one of the best rushing offenses last year, and I think they're going to be much better this year overall on both sides of the ball. So I think the Cowboys are going to have to do a lot to really overcome the losses they had this year. Also losing, Randy Gregory as well on the defensive side of the ball. And I just don't love what I'm seeing from the Cowboys this year. I still think they'll be a solid team. As good as last year, personally, no. I think they'll finish second in the NFC East, maybe, 9, 10, 10-ish, 11 wins. And I think the Eagles will get, 11, 12, 13, something like that. So that is my prediction for the Cowboys heading into this first week game. And they face off against the Buccaneers. And I'm going to take the Buccaneers in this one. The only worry with the Buccaneers, of course, is their offensive line because of all the injuries they've sustained there for Tom Brady. We'll see if they're able to, combat that and, keep Tom safe, because Tom probably wants to be kept safe, as do all NFL quarterbacks. Okay, next topic we have. Moving on to the Steelers, the Pittsburgh Steelers. It came out in the past week that they have decided to go with Mitch Trubisky as their starter over first-round pick Kenny Pickett, which I don't think is the most shocking thing for the Steelers to do. You come in this offseason, you sign Trubisky to a 2-year, $14 million contract. And even though I feel like there's this idea of Trubisky being a really bad quarterback, it's just sort of in the air, I feel like, after his time in Chicago. When we look back at his time in Chicago in 2018, Mitch Trubisky in just his second year in Chicago was a Pro Bowl alternate, and the Bears went 12-4. Then you come into 2019, he played with a torn labrum, so that sort of messed up that season. And then just the situation going on in Chicago with Matt Nagy just didn't seem to be, the best situation for Mitch Trubisky. Apparently in one meeting I was reading about, Matt Nagy reportedly called out Trubisky and called him uncoachable, and there were these ideas that supposedly that's when Matt Nagy started to lose the locker room. So Matt Nagy didn't seem to be a fan of Mitch Trubisky, and because of that, that could have led, I think, to some tension there and leading to Mitch Trubisky not playing as well as maybe he would have in a better situation. And so I think when you look at the Steelers this year, Mitch Trubisky going to be the starter. It's going to be a tough, first 6 or 7 games for them, facing off against the Bengals, Patriots, Browns, Jets, Bills, and Buccaneers. I think they could take the Browns and Jets. The other ones, I'm not so sure. Even Kenny Pickett, I think, could struggle in those games. And I think lots of people sort of believe that it's only a matter of time until Kenny Pickett comes in and becomes a starter for the Pittsburgh Steelers, which I think when you look at Kenny Pickett in the preseason, he played pretty well. He went 26 of 39 for 261 yards and 3 touchdowns. And I think, of course, when you draft a quarterback in the first round, you're most likely going to start him at some point. I don't know if it's year one, because depending on how this Steelers team looks with Mitch Trubisky back there and Mike Tomlin as a coach, I feel like they could, if they're sitting around 500, come 3, 4, 5, 6 games into the season, I feel like Mike Tomlin could just stick with Trubisky. Maybe Trubisky goes the entire season without Kenny Pickett coming in to fill in for him. I think if Trubisky starts playing terribly, at that point, if he consistently has been playing terribly, then I think you're like, okay, well, things aren't working out. We might as well get Kenny Pickett in there, allow him to play some, get his reps up, because I think for any young quarterback, the more reps they have, typically the better. Of course, if you're out there and you don't have much protection and things aren't going well, sort of like Justin Fields the past year or so, then maybe you want to hold him out. But I think that if Trubisky's playing completely terribly a few weeks in, 5, 6, 7, 8 weeks in, maybe you move to Kenny Pickett. But if Mitch Trubisky's keeping the Steelers team afloat, I wouldn't be surprised to see him stay the QB the entire season and allow Kenny Pickett to maybe sit an entire year and sort of learn behind him instead of being thrown in there. But we'll see. I do think it really relies on the play of Mitch Trubisky. I do like what the Steelers did at receiver. They have Chase Claypool, Deontay Johnson, and then to add George Pickens, I really like that move there. I think he was a steal in the second round. There's supposedly some concerns about his character and his injury history from what I was reading during the draft process. And a lot of people said he could have maybe been, a round 1 player if it weren't for those things, maybe even one of the first receivers off the board. So I do think the Steelers got a steal there with George Pickens, and we saw him play really well in the preseason. So I honestly do like the Steelers team. Their offensive line may be a little shaky, but I think their receiver core is pretty solid. I think their running back group, of course, with Najee Harris back there, he's a baller, so they should be fine when it comes to that. And I think when you look at last year with Ben Roethlisberger, he's a beast. He was a beast in his career. But I think that, obviously, he was sort of starting to fall off a cliff, and I think that Mitch Trubisky could be an upgrade this year for them. When you look at the AFC North, though, it is pretty competitive. You got the Ravens with Lamar. You got the Bengals with Joe Burrow. The Browns may not be that big of a concern until Deshaun Watson comes back, if he's able to get back to his prior self, because he hasn't played in, 2 years, basically. So is what's his name? Jacoby Brissett going to be able to hold things up until he comes back, Deshaun Watson? I'm not so sure about that. So I do think the Ravens and Bengals are better than the Steelers, but we'll see what happens with Trubisky and the Steelers team overall. And then to finish today's first podcast off, first episode of Sideline Scoop Uncut, I want to talk about Lamar Jackson and his current contract situation. I'm hoping that, that a moment after I film this, there isn't some news about a new contract or something. So I'm filming this Thursday morning at 10:11 a.m. Central. So if something happens after, that could be the case. We'll see. But Lamar Jackson and the Broncos, or not the Broncos, definitely not the Broncos. Lamar Jackson and the Ravens have been in this, contract dispute this entire offseason. He, of course, doesn't have an agent, which sort of makes things a little more complicated because there's no buffer between the player and the organization. So, of course, when you're, negotiating a contract, you're, sending, your idea of what you think is fair. Someone else, comes back. It's like, no, I think this is fair. So there's sort of a lot going back and forth, and it usually helps to have an agent. But Lamar Jackson wants to be his own man and do his own thing, which I do respect Lamar Jackson doing that. And up to this point, he hasn't signed a contract. It seems to be the issue is the guaranteed money, which, as I talked about earlier, Deshaun Watson signing a $230 million completely guaranteed contract sort of messed things up for lots of teams who don't want to come in and give their quarterbacks, completely guaranteed money, because that typically doesn't happen in the NFL. And since that point, since Deshaun Watson got that contract, we've seen lots of other contracts happen. And even though Deshaun Watson did get that massive guarantee, guys like Kyler Murray and Russell Wilson definitely did not get that same completely, fully guaranteed contract that Deshaun Watson got, which partly happened because there was basically a bidding war for Deshaun Watson. The Saints were sort of going for him, and the Browns, come up and give him fully guaranteed, so it's sort of hard to pass up, which I understand in that situation why the Browns are willing to do that, because they wanted him so badly, which we'll see if that pays out for them when it comes to play on the field. Who knows? But if you look at Kyler Murray and Russell Wilson's contract since, Kyler Murray signed a $230 million extension, only $160 million guaranteed. Only $160 million. Man, must be tough. Just kidding. But you know what I mean. Only $160 million out of $230 instead of the fully guaranteed that Deshaun Watson got. And then Russell Wilson recently signed his extension, and he signed a $245 million deal with only $165 million guaranteed. So even though Deshaun Watson got that crazy contract, these guys following haven't gotten fully guaranteed contracts. And it sort of seems like Lamar Jackson is probably hasn't, come to a deal with the Ravens because of the guaranteed money. He did say recently that the deadline for a contract to happen is Friday, which is tomorrow, the day I'm filming this, the day after Friday. So maybe because he put that deadline on, will the Ravens be willing to say, you know what, Lamar, you want the guaranteed money, we'll just give it to you. Maybe they'll bend and break and just in the final moment just say, you know what, Lamar, fine, you're a beast, we'll pay you. But if not, it really seems like Lamar Jackson is completely fine with playing out this year on the fifth-year option, which he is playing on, which is only $23 million per year. And the thing is, if he plays this year on that $23 million contract on his fifth-year option, he could come in next year, be a free agent, which means the Ravens will likely franchise tag him, which will be around $45 million. And we saw in the past, Kirk Cousins sort of did this sort of thing where he got franchise tagged in 2016 and then also in 2017. And then he got a full guaranteed $84 million deal to sign with the Vikings in 2018. So maybe Lamar Jackson is looking at that and it's like, okay, maybe they won't give me a fully guaranteed, long-term extension, but maybe I can get my guaranteed money just by going year by year. He must trust that he's going to play very well this year, which I see no reason why he won't. I think he is a beast. If you look at Lamar Jackson and sort of how he's played in his past, 37-12 in the regular season. The only player with 2,500 plus passing yards and 1,000 plus rushing yards in a single season, and he's done it 2 times. So I do think if I was the Ravens, I would pay Lamar Jackson. But of course, when you're up there in the decision makers, you got to make smart decisions with your money because the salary cap, the different players you got to pay. It makes sense that they're sort of in the middle of this contract dispute, and we'll see if it gets finished off by Friday. But I'm not completely sure it will. It's sort of seeming right now like it's not going to happen because we are only 24 hours away from that deadline that Lamar Jackson said. And Lamar was like, if it comes after Friday, I'm focusing on football. We're done with contract discussions, which I think is good because you don't want a player having to negotiate throughout the season. You want him to focus on the game, which Lamar 100% seems to be focused on. And I feel like the Ravens are going to have a pretty solid year. With all the weapons they have. I mean, they lost Marquise Brown, but they still have Rashad Bateman, also my fantasy team. Hopefully he plays well for my fantasy team. And sorry, my camera cut off there. I forgot there's a 30-minute limit. I don't typically deal with that problem because my videos are usually 3 to 10 minutes, but this podcast thing, it's a little different, so I got to figure out if I can change that for the future podcasts if they happen, which I feel like they will. But that's pretty much the biggest things I wanted to discuss. I would love to hear your guys' thoughts in the comments down below. Also, if you watched this entire thing, thank you. I appreciate you. Feel free to, let me know your comments down below if you enjoyed it. If you want to see more of these in the future. I did enjoy it because typically on my other channel, it's mainly sort of quick videos. I'm usually doing a few a day. Reacting to news, 3 to 10 minute videos, typically 3 to 5, just sort of quick little things. I figured I would try an entire podcast just to sort of see how it went because I thought it would be enjoyable to do sort of more of a long form thing. So I would be very grateful if you let me know down below what you think. If you enjoyed it and you want to see more and you haven't subscribed, feel free to subscribe. Drop a like on the video as well. But it's very exciting that we are finally here. Week 1 of the NFL season. I'll probably be out next week with another video, sort of giving my thoughts on what happened during the weekend and sort of what everything is looking like around the NFL. And maybe as well I'll drop some videos throughout the week of clips from this as well. So we'll see what happens. I just thought of this yesterday. Decided I would fling it out here, give my thoughts on the things that I thought were interesting around the NFL, and we'll see if it continues up to this point. But I'm hoping on Sunday the Packers come in, win, because there's nothing more I love to see than the Packers come in, beat our rivals in the Minnesota Vikings, and hopefully the Packers win the Super Bowl this year. Because it's been a little while, and I'm ready for another one. So we'll see what happens. But thank you for watching. If you want to follow me on Twitter, stay up to date with things, Luke_Beller over there on Twitter. That is all for this video. I appreciate all you guys. If you watched the entire time, I appreciate you very much. But thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.